And the referee again checking his watch. And there it goes! The final whistle!
Carlo Corazon will wait inside the box for this from Martinet. And a header on it there. And that might have been it. That is a goal for Canada. The header was it Jason DeVos?
One last chance for Canada. Sophie Schmidt takes a deflection. Matheson! Is that the goal that wins bronze for Canada?
Qualified for World Cup 86, defeating Honduras by a score of 2-1 here in St. John's, Newfoundland this afternoon.
Welcome to the final edition of the Canada Soccer Nation podcast for the year 2020. We'll gladly see the back of 2020. It's been a challenging year, to say the least, for everyone involved in the sport and everyone around the world. But I'm pleased now to be joined by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer. Brad, we're getting to that time of year as well, towards the holiday period, where we start to hand out awards and we celebrate the good, although there hasn't been a lot to celebrate in 2020, unfortunately. But we'll be celebrating some of the good and the great of Canadian soccer in the weeks ahead. Tell us a little bit about the year-end awards season at Canada Soccer.
For sure. I'd be remiss to not riff on your good riddance 2020 comments off the hop there. Man, get gone. But yeah,
it's been rough.
End of years. Yeah, it's true. End of year is a surprisingly busy time for us, regardless of a global pandemic and what's going on. Throughout November and December, we announced the nominees and then announced the award winners for the Canada Soccer Player Awards. So we'll be rolling that out over the coming days. Announced the nominees this week with some media and coach voting happening over the next little while. And yeah, the lists, are a who's who. So on the youth men's side, you'll have names like Michael Baldissimo, Tejan Buchanan, Alistair Johnston, Liam Miller, Kamal Miller, Harry Payton, and Dane St. Clair. All great young players that we would have seen in competition this year and did see in competitions previously. On the women's side, Tanya Boychuk, Samantha Chang, Kaysa Massey, Emma Regan, Jade Rose, Caitlin Shaw, Jasmine Wilkinson. I mean, these are all names that fans are definitely going to recognize and that the general public are going to get to know over the next couple of years. As we've talked about previously, as Bev Priestman has to start to move some youths through her squad, these are definitely names that are going to pop up over the next little while. So congratulations to all of those youth players. Typically, we would have done a U17 and a U20 national team player. However, with the restrictions this year, we limited it to one youth international player of the year. And those are them, both men and women. Obviously, we've got senior men and women, and we've got a long list of players that our listeners are definitely going to recognize. I can take us through them. The Janine Becky, Kadisha Buchanan, Alicia Chapman, Jessie Fleming, Jordan Heidema, Steph Labbe, Ashley Lawrence, Nichelle Prince, Sophie Schmidt, Des Scott, Kaylin Sheridan, Christine Sinclair, and Shalina Zadorsky. So a who's who of the current women's national team makeup, who obviously played in CONCACAF Olympic qualifying in January earlier this year. I'm sure most people will remember, or maybe not at this point, that the women did qualify for Tokyo 2020, which is now Tokyo 2021. And Ms. Sinclair also broke the international goal scoring record. So yeah, lots of talented women's national team players in there. So we'll be rolling that out next week. And then on the men's side, another long list of men's national team players who, again, didn't see very much action this year for the men's national team. None, if I remember correctly. But who all played in club football across the globe. So we've got Tesho Akindele, Scott Arfield, Milan Boyan, Jonathan David, Alfonso Davies, Stephanie Stacchio, Junior Hoylett, Atiba Hutchinson, Mark Anthony Kay, Kyle Laren, Richie Larea, Jonathan Osorio, and the young Sam Piet. So quite a list there too. I mean, we've got some superstars, we've got some other superstars, we've got even more superstars. I mean, it's a fun men's national team program right now, Jason, as we talk about every 2 weeks.
Yeah, as opposed to what it was when I played. Thanks for the backhanded compliment, if you want to call it that. No,
I would never. No, for sure. I mean,
it's that long ago that nobody remembers. But no, if you look at the players in our men's and women's program at the youth and senior level, it's exciting. There's a lot of really good players coming through the system and progressing to the highest level and playing at the highest level in Europe in club football, which wasn't always the case for sure. But I think it's really exciting what the future could look like and is going to look like for both programs. So those are the player awards. There's another award that I want to get some more detail on, because I actually think this is a great initiative, the Canada Soccer Nation Champions Award. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we typically at the year end would have a moments campaign where we would sort of honor all of the big moments that happened across our properties, be it men's or women's national team, youth national team, the referee program, the coach program, our national championships, our futsal Canadian championships. There are just so many things that we had to park this year. That rolling out a campaign that honored successes at all of those levels was a really difficult thing to wrap our head around and didn't seem like the best way forward. So we conceptualized a recognition campaign that will run on an annual basis now, that will look to acknowledge one volunteer, or this year anyway, one volunteer in each of our member associations, at a member association, member organization, as we lovingly call them. So a club or academy volunteer who's supported a safe return to soccer in the face of COVID-19 protocols, in support of Canada Soccer's return to soccer guidelines. So holistically, the program will look to acknowledge one person in every member association annually that made a contribution above and beyond. And this year specifically, I think it only made sense for us to have a look at what could we do to honor the people who put themselves out there and put their health on the line in certain circumstances, and certainly raised up the ability of their club to be able to offer programming under the protocols that made sense in the jurisdictions in which they reside, to get kids back to playing the game.
Yeah, I just think it's a fantastic initiative, because we've said before, and I think most people, if not all people involved in the game at the grassroots level will agree, the game is built on the shoulders of volunteers and individuals who selflessly give back to their club, their academy, to their community, so that kids can play soccer. And this year was especially challenging given COVID and the realities of dealing with return to play. So I think it's very fitting that we'll be celebrating the commitment of these individuals and the ongoing drive to make the game safe for kids and enjoyable for kids so that they can fall in love with soccer. So I think it's a great initiative, and really looking forward to seeing who the inaugural winners in each member association are going to be. On the professional soccer front, there was also an announcement around the Canadian Championship. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, Canada Soccer has been working towards scheduling the 2020 Canadian Championship final, which will take place between Forge FC as winners of the Island Games bubble and Toronto FC as champions of the small Canadian-based competition for Canadian MLS clubs. And there had been some murmurs out there that we were planning to not host this 2020 Canadian Championship final, which were not true. So with Toronto FC unfortunately bowing out of MLS playoffs, and some questions being asked, we assured everyone that we 100% do plan to hold a Canadian Championship final for the 2020 season, to send a team to the CONCACAF Champions League, and we will do so in Q1 2021.
Mm-hmm. I think it's only fitting that the 2020 championship doesn't happen in 2020, because it's not been a normal year. So it's going to be pushed back a little bit longer than we maybe would have liked, but it still will happen, which is great. You touched on Toronto FC being eliminated, surprisingly, I think, in many people's eyes from the MLS playoffs. Montreal Impact also going, unfortunately, out of the competition at the first hurdle. A little bit more action, though, on the professional front with Forge involved in CONCACAF League play coming up.
That's right. Forge with an opportunity to stamp their way into the CONCACAF Champions League against... Did we have any notes about how to pronounce this last week after I butchered Akai?
I didn't hear any complaints from anyone.
That's
so
good.
I think you're now the pronunciation guru.
I'm not that. We'll get to that a little later. I'm not. But yeah, Forge has a match coming up this week try and move forward. Obviously, the top 6 teams in CONCACAF League will automatically move forward, and then there will be more opportunities. So Forge in tough. They'll be playing this match in Dominican Republic, I believe, against Haitian side RKA, and yeah, we'll definitely be following that as well, with the Impact having qualified as the champion of the 2019 Canadian Championship for CONCACAF Champions League, and that having gotten postponed. They'll return to action in their second leg matchup inside of a bubble. Are we calling that a bubble? I'm not sure if they're calling that a bubble. On December 15th. So they'll be looking to improve on their showing from a few years ago, where they were finalists and damn near champions of the Scotiabank CONCACAF Champions League.
Yeah, it's exciting times, and you look at the CPL this year, obviously the second year for the league in its existence, having to deal with a bubble, the Island Games, which was a fascinating tournament, an incredible experience, I'm sure, for the players. But Forge winning the second championship in its history, and carving out a new path, creating history as they go in CONCACAF, which is really exciting for a startup league that's trying to make a footprint across the region, which is exciting. Over in Europe, on the professional front, we saw Jonathan David score his first goal for Lille, which is always nice for a striker to get that monkey off their back and not have to deal with the pressure that's going to come from fans. But having worked with Jonathan, I know he's an absolute star of a player and is going to go from strength to strength. So really looking forward to seeing his progression continue. But the UEFA Champions League draw was made for the men and the women, Brad. What can you tell us about that with a Canadian lens?
Yeah, for sure. Keen eye on the UEFA Women's Champions League for sure, with Man City, Chelsea, PSG and Lyon all involved in the draw, with lots of Canadian women playing over there. So Janine Beckie and Man City will play Swedish opposition, Chelsea, and Jessie Fleming against Portugal's Benfica, PSG, and Ashley and Jordan will play Polish opposition, and Kadisha Buchanan and Lyon will play Juventus. Across 2 legs, 9 and 10 December. I don't currently have the exact dates and kickoff times for those matches. The draw was just made, but 9 and 10 December, and then 15 and 16 December for those 2-legged ties for those 5 women. And yeah, I mean, it being Thursday, the day that we record, Champions League underway right now. Just saw Jonathan David wrap up, got an assist on Lille's lone goal in a 1-1 draw against Milan. Manjikar James still in Champions League action. Obviously, Bayern's still in Champions League action, and we hotly anticipate the return of Alphonso Davies from injury. I believe he's back in training. Is that what you've heard? I think that's a fact. I
believe so.
Yeah, so obviously we're all keeping a keen eye on his return from injury and return to form, I say, in quotation marks. But yeah, lots of football. Thankfully, lots of football for us all to watch, and lots of insane Canadian talent for us to watch as well.
A little closer to home, big weekend last weekend where Canada Soccer held its annual meeting of the membership. And we will be speaking a little later on in the podcast with the incoming president-elect, who will be talking to us about the challenges that are coming up for Canada Soccer as we deal with a global pandemic and what the future looks like as we build towards 2026 and beyond. So stay tuned for that. But after the break, we're going to speak with an individual who works and has probably held every job in Canadian soccer. He has been head coach of the under-20 men's team at one stage. He is currently a learning facilitator, very experienced learning facilitator who works extensively across Canada Soccer's coach education program. And he also led the Montreal Impact to its first championship in 1994, which is going back a long, long time, to a point where there was a very young 20-ish year old central defender with a crew cut and who hadn't filled out yet, who was fortunate enough to be on that team. So stay tuned for that conversation, which is coming up right after the break. Welcome back to the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. Very pleased to be joined now by a gentleman that I've known for 25, nearly 30 years. I think, we go back that far. Valerio Gazzola is well known throughout soccer in Canada. He's held pretty much every role there is to hold. He was a former all-star player at McGill University. He was co-captain there. He was coach there. I think you've held every single role there is in Soccer Quebec. You're currently serving as a technical director of the region of Laval. You're also a high school teacher. You're a learning facilitator for Canada Soccer at every level: children's license, youth license, B license, A license. Where do you find all the time, Valerio? That's probably the first question I want to ask you.
I have a patient wife. That's why. I don't know. We just go along with it, and you make time for it. And it's because it's a passion above all. It's a passion, and you find the time.
How did you find, let's go back to the 80s when you played at McGill. What was the standard like at the university level back when you played?
It's it was pretty amazing because we would have you'd have players there from all over the world coming to McGill, international students. And you got a flavor of the international game as teammates. And the game itself, I thought, was pretty good, pretty well structured. It wasn't off the cuff. It wasn't necessarily only the physical part and just the talent. I felt that's where I first learned to think as a player. It's sad to say, but at 18 years old, you actually learn to think as a player and what you're doing on the field and putting more emphasis on strategies and tactics. That was the big difference when we got there. So it was a pretty good level.
Yeah. How did you transition, or how did you make the decision to transition to coaching? Was that something that you felt was just a natural extension of your playing career and you just evolved, or were you the last one in line?
Oh, Jason, if you really want to know this, here we go. So I'm in training camp with the under 18 national team. And it's the last day, and we have a scrimmage, and it was with Bob Beer Park at the time, and Brian Hughes, and Frank. His name escapes me, from BC. It's going to come to me, and penalty shot. I said, I'll take it. Don't worry, I'll take it. Inter-squad game. Keeper stops it. Yeah. And I said, that's it. I'm going to get cut. So I said, that's it. I'm going into coaching. But honestly, that was the time at 17 years old where I felt, I'd learned so much in training camp that I felt like I can, share this with other players. I'd like to get into coaching because although I was there, I didn't think I had, the physical tools to really excel at a higher level. But I played semi-pro, which was fine. But that's where I really got the motivation to go into coaching.
And in terms of qualifications, did you straight away, when you got that taste of coaching, did you realize I need to learn? I've got to learn the game here. I've got to learn how to coach the game. Did you then start pursuing your coaching qualifications as well at the same time?
Absolutely. At the time, it was called the level 1s, 2s, and 3s with Thompson. And those were the courses that we had. And it was important to get our courses. It was important to get the theory courses. What was a bit more difficult was how do we go get some of the international flavors and the international part of the game? Because it wasn't always obvious to go get some international coaches to come to Canada, to be quite honest. That was pretty difficult. And when you did get a chance to do them, we would go and follow some of those lectures. But absolutely, it was so important to go get the coaching experience through the courses because, as you know, there was no high-level pro teams other than the Whitecaps at the time and the Montreal Manic, and even at that time with the NASL, it was on and off.
Yeah, it's interesting because I get asked this question all the time too about the difference between formal education and informal education. And I always say to people, and I'm sure you do the same as a coach educator, the formal education is important because a lot of the theory aspects of coaching, a lot of the academic research that goes into it is really important to understand. But you know, your formal qualification is the start of your learning journey, isn't it? And it's actually going out and coaching and getting that experience of making mistakes where you're really going to learn. How important is it to have a balance between the two?
I think it's key. It's really crucial because the formal education is, if I can use another terminology, just like the theory part. It's here's the science, here's the theory, this is what you need to know. And then the informal is, as far as I'm concerned, is the practical part, is to say how much of the theory is in the practical part. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the best example that I can use is a couple of years ago with John Herdman, where when I went for a couple of weeks, 3 weeks with the senior women's team at the time when he was with them, and you have all this theory and you think you're up to date, and you're up to date with the theory because of everything that you're learning through the science. But then when you get there, you actually see the science being put to practice, whether it's with performance, sports science and everything else. And you're actually putting now the theory into practice in a practical setting with an international event. And I think the both is really important, like you said, especially in trying to find that balance, because you can't only stick to the theory, you also have to live it, go to the practical, almost like a trial and error.
And in your early coaching career, you had success. I mean, your first head coaching job at the professional level was with the Montreal Impact, 1994, and it resulted in a championship. Did you think at that time, this is easy, I'm going to win every year, I'm just going to go from strength to strength? Or what was in your mind at that point, Valerio?
Well, in 1994, I had the luxury in 93 of being the assistant coach with the Supra at the time. And I did go to the World Cup with the under 17. So I had some coaching experience, but still at 30 years old in 94, when you inherit that job, the only thing you're thinking of is you're dealing with men, you're dealing with, young players, but also men. And it had a lot to do with managing the players, and not only the X's and O's. And you just don't know from one year to the next how much success you're going to have. And with all the sports that we go through, from hockey and football, and now in North America with soccer at the time, you knew as a head coach that your days are counted, quote unquote. So how much of success can you get in order to continue? And to be frank, I was looking forward to being assistant coach with Eddie Fermani for a couple of years at the time and to learn the trade a bit more. But when you're handed the opportunity, you say, okay, let's go with it and let's see what we can do. And, I was fortunate enough to stick around for another 7 years with the club.
Yeah, it's interesting when I look back at that period of time, even from a personal level. If and I've said this countless times, if I didn't have the opportunity to play professional soccer in Canada, I never would have gone on to play in Europe and played for the national team, because there's a big gap between youth football and the professional game, and I was just fortunate to live in a period of our history where there was professional soccer. So you fast forward, 26 years to where we are today, and we see the growing spread of the professional game on the men's side in Canada. How important is it for there to be professional football for men and women in our country, so that the next generation of Canadian kids have something to aspire to, a level that they can play at, and they see professional football as a possible career route for them?
Well, Jason, you are a perfect example, actually. And, you were a pro player at a very young age. And I think that's what we need here in Canada as far as structures are concerned. And that's where we're going to with the CPL and MLS. So we're getting both flavors where the CPL allows even the younger players to start playing at 16, 17 years old in a pro environment or pro setting. And you also have the MLS that has this balance between young players and pro players that have played at a real high level, or maybe pro players that are ending their career. You have that mix. And it is so important because, like you said, once those players enter in that environment, hopefully it's a stepping stone to maybe bigger clubs and bigger clubs in Europe. And that stepping stone will allow you to gain maturity, to understand the game a bit more, to understand how to manage not only what happens on the field, but outside the field in order to be successful.
Yeah, learning to be a professional is so important. And I still remember an instance in my very early days. I'm not sure if it was when I was 19 or 20, but with the Montreal Impact, I think it was when I was 20, 94. And Enzo Cancina, who had come back from Europe to play with the Impact. He was towards the end of his career, but I watched him train, and I watched the way that he approached training. And I remember just picking up little bits of information from Enzo about and just how to defend. And I remember one of the things he said to me was, "Jason, you got to smell danger. You're a defender. You got to smell it. You gotta. It's in your bones. You know when there's danger. A situation's developing that's not right. And I'm 46 now, and I still think of that conversation I had with him. So that exposure for young players is invaluable for them, isn't it, going forward?
Well, I learned from him too. And he obviously comes from a culture from Italy. And my worry at the time is I thought, my God, we're playing 2 games a week, plus the training, plus the traveling. Yeah. And he would say, okay, I'm going to go train again in the morning. I would say, no, Enzo, you got to... But he knew exactly what he was doing. He understood what his body needed and how much training he needed. And he would take that to, take it to another level as far as individual training is concerned. And like you said, you learned from it. I, as a coach, learned from that culture or that background. And that's how, like you said, there's the practical part or the informal part, even as a player, that allows you to grow into the game.
Yeah. What culture is that? Calm, rational, no arguments? Is that the culture?
Well, I don't know, but you know what? At that time with Enzo, you'd say, okay, Enzo, just go ahead and do it. Just make sure you're on top of it. And I tell you what, if there was one player in that final game that really gave an outstanding performance, it was Enzo. He really held that back line together. Remember, Jason, he played with you and Patrick Diop as a sweeper at the time. Yeah. Imagine.
I know. The game has changed, Valerio.
Wow.
I want to touch on a little bit your teaching career, because I think it transitions nicely into coach education. You've been a teacher now for, 40, 50, 60 years at least?
Actually 30 years. Come on, I'm not that old. I got another 4 years before I retire.
I did see in the last little while, I think it was last year, that you were celebrated by your school for your teaching career, which is an incredible achievement, because it's not easy to be a teacher, but it ties in nicely with being a coach educator, doesn't it? Because it's really the same mindset that you're there to create an environment for learning. Not to say that you have all the answers, but you're there to create that environment for learning. Has that been your philosophy over the years as a teacher and a coach educator?
Well, we use the word coach and we use the word teacher, but we're really educators. Mm-hmm. And as an educator, we're there to create the environment. That's what we're there for. So we have all the competencies, and we want to share that competency with your students or with your players. But the reality is, set the setting for them and let them either discover, let them experiment. And that's where most of the learning occurs. So as educators, whether it's in a school environment or as a coach, we're there to set the environment so that they can experience everything. And then you guide them along the way. And what are you actually showing them? You're actually showing them cues where they can pick up, and by understanding the cues, recognizing cues, they're able to make decisions now. That's what we are as educators, because if you just tell them, then they might understand. It doesn't mean that they've learned. There's a difference between understanding and learning. Understanding means you comprehend. The learning means that you're actually able to apply it. You've actually tried it, and now you can apply it. And you're so right. The environment is key to learning.
One of my favorite quotes is the best teachers are those who show you where to look, but don't tell you what to see. And I feel like that always applies to the coach education process. How challenging has it been in the last 9 months as we've been transitioning everything online? I mean, obviously for school and teaching in a high school, you must have challenges there, but also challenges in coach education. How difficult has that been to create that environment and do it virtually?
Well, Jason, you touched on it a couple of minutes ago, where you although we're online, and of course there's usefulness to it, which is because you're able to reach a lot of people. What you want to do is take the practical part of the game online. So if you're going to go into some theoretical concepts or principles, well, how do you take those principles and now put it into a practical part? So for example, some of the things that we've done is the following. So they can actually go back. If they understand the theory part, they actually go back and now they take video clips and they go find what we've spoken about in theory, and they come back online to show us the clips and the practical part of what we were talking about. Or they actually all went back with their club team, and this was the beauty of it. Everyone that was online, when they had the chance to go back with their club team and give a practice session, they were able to share their practice sessions with the other colleagues. We were able to analyze their practice sessions and certain clips of certain theories that we were working on with modules or concepts that was online. So it is challenging, but I think the great part about it is that every educator, every coach is able to work along their own pace, within their own realities. And geographically, we've just connected the whole country together.
Mm-hmm. I think it's actually made us more efficient as educators. So we're able to devote more time to meeting the individual coach at their level. And this is one of the things that I've experienced myself as I've gone through my own journey of learning about coaching post playing days, is that everyone in every course is at a different level. So it's very difficult to expect them all to do the same things on the same schedule at the same time. Do you feel like the online environment creates more opportunities to individualize the learning process?
Well, what it does is it has given them access, immediate access to the instructor, to the learning facilitator. So although you're online with a group of coaches, you can also take that to another level. And we've created more mentors and mentees. And so by having a mentor, you have more access to your needs or specific needs for each of the educators that are following the courses. And you're always, we used to say we're a phone call away. Well, now you're one click away from just communicating, by video conference. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. You're a Zoom call away or a Teams call away.
There you go.
Whichever platform is your choice. Well, listen, Valerio, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a very busy man and you've done great work in coach education over the years. I want to thank you on behalf of the scores of coaches who have gone through the process with you as a mentor. I've lost count of the number who have told me that you mentored them in Quebec and across Canada. So thank you very much. Keep up the great work, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Well, thank you very much.
Excellent. That was Valerio Gazzola, the technical director of the region of Laval and one of Canada Soccer's outstanding coach developers. When we come back after the break, we will speak with Canada Soccer's new president-elect about the years to come for Canada Soccer, what the future holds, and what COVID has done to the game in Canada from coast to coast, and how we're going to bounce back and be stronger for it in the future. Stay tuned. His career in soccer spans over 45 years, starting as a youth player in Scarborough, Ontario. He went on to compete at 5 national championships and earn provincial and national all-star recognition at the U Sports level. He is a nationally licensed coach and recent inductee into the Western Mustang Sports Hall of Fame. A Canada Soccer director since 2012, he has led 2 cycles of Canada Soccer's strategic planning process, developing the Leading Soccer Nation 2014 to 2018 and Canada Soccer Nation 2019 to 2021 documents as the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. An internationally renowned public speaker, he is a tenured professor at McMaster University, where he serves as the chair strategic management at the De Groot School of Business. He holds a PhD in business administration from the Ivey Business School at Western University. I am very pleased to be joined now by Canada Soccer's president-elect, Dr. Nick Bontis. Dr. Bontis, congratulations. First and foremost, how are you feeling after the election result?
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm feeling great. I'm excited. I'm honored to serve the membership, and I'm nervous as hell, which is awesome because it is a massive challenge that we have in front of us. Never in a million years did I envision taking on a role such as this in the middle of a global pandemic. But hey, that's life. We move with the punches, as they say. But it's a great memory among a bunch of other great memories I've had at Canada Soccer over the years. You know, when I think back at some of the best memories I've had serving on the board, you know, I think of Christine Sinclair's record, as the top goal scorer in the world. What an awesome memory that was. I mean, are we ever going to see such a thing again in our lifetimes? I remember the 2012 Olympics when the women won. I was actually in Greece on a really tiny island, crowded around with my family around a PC, the only computer on the island that actually had internet connection. So I actually watched that game through an internet connection in 2012. What an amazing memory that was. And then, of course, I mean, in the last year, Jason, amazing memories in terms of performances on the men's side, right? Our men's team won 2-0 at BMO. Of course, that's the field that was created because of a Youth World Cup earlier on. Beating the Americans was awesome. And then I was there when Costa Rica lost to us with the U17s, and I was there when we beat Mexico with the U15. So, beating Mexico, Costa Rica, and the U.S. in the last 12 months, that's an amazing memory too. So I'm excited, all in. I'm excited. I'm raring to go.
What were the main priorities that you outlined would be your focus as Canada Soccer president?
So oddly enough, just so your listeners appreciate, everything has been delayed. So when I actually wrote my platform to run for president, it was Christmas of last year. So things were different back then, Jason, as you know. But you know what? Maybe my platform hasn't really changed that much. I mean, I was focusing on growth. I need to gather all of the expertise and all of the smart people who are at the grassroots level, right up to the national level and the pro level, and bring them together so that we can collaborate and grow the game. It's all about growing soccer to the highest profile possible in this country, obviously en route to the 2026 World Cup. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, to make sure that we leverage that once in a lifetime opportunity. So that was my platform in Christmas of last year. So think of it as January 2020. Fast forward now to November 2020. Obviously, none of us predicted that we would be here. Clearly, I did not predict that my presidency would start in this manner. But you know what? I believe that the most important message is still the same, that our focus should be on growing the game. Obviously, we need to get it back to a stable, healthy position pre-COVID. And once we do that, then we can, accelerate the initiatives necessary to make sure that we take advantage of the World Cup in 26.
Mm-hmm. You've been involved in virtually every level of the game. How has your experience in the game as a player, as a parent, a volunteer, as a fan prepared you for this role that you've taken on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. I mean, sometimes people criticize presidents or politicians that they're too far removed. I'm not. I'm the opposite. I mean, I live this sport every day. If anybody were to come into my office, all they would see is soccer photos, soccer medals, soccer scarves from every game I've been to in Asia and Europe. I am a fan. I mean, watching soccer on TV, that's the only channel allowed in my household. So I think you need to be a fan first and foremost and love the game. Whenever I travel, Jason, I always try to watch a game live. I even When I got married, Jason, to my wife, Stacy, we actually went on our honeymoon, and we actually went to a pro soccer game during our honeymoon. So I'll never let up the opportunity as a fan to watch a game. Obviously, as a player, I mean, I played at the grassroots level growing up as a kid, 5, 6 years old. Scarborough Maple Leaf was the club I was with, moved on to senior soccer with Scarborough, Missouri, and had the great fortune of playing, winning 5 Ontario Cups, playing at the club national championships, going on to Western, having a great career, obviously OUA and U Sport, which is awesome. I think being a player gives you the perspective of what's required in terms of development and coaching, which migrated me into coaching, obviously. So, after my playing days were done from a competitive level, I mean, I still try playing old timers, Jason, but I migrated to becoming a coach. Getting my national licenses so that I can learn about the game. I still am a student of the game. I want to learn both of the technical side, how to improve our sport, as well as the administrative side. And I'm a parent. Being a parent is also a critical role, I think, as president, because, I mean, as a parent, you want the best for your kids. All 3 of my kids played soccer at some point. You want to make sure that when you deliver your kids to a club environment, that it's a safe environment. I think that's critically important. I think the issue of cost, we pay fees to play soccer in this country. It's a pay-for-play model, but that's because the professional side of our game in this country has not yet matured to the same extent as it has, let's say, in some European countries, where often first-team clubs finance a lot of the play, going all the way down to the youth and the grassroots level. But we'll get there. Obviously, things have changed. When I grew up playing soccer, we didn't have the MLS, we didn't have the CPL, so things are a little bit different now. And then finally, as a volunteer, I mean, that's what soccer is about in this country. Not just soccer, but every other sport. It's about volunteerism and giving the tools to volunteers that they need and their expertise to professionalize the game. People donate so much time and effort, Jason, as you know, all across the country. You get to meet them all. I get to meet them all. And it's an amazing thing that people are so committed to the sport because they love it. It's part of their DNA. So I think, all in, those are the different perspectives that I have in terms of my experiences. Obviously, I'm a business professor. That's going to help in this COVID environment because we got a lot of business ahead of us. We have to raise the profile of our sport and build up our revenues again to get into a healthy position.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a lot of long-term initiatives like systemic change and how the culture of soccer, the professional game, can create those incentives for player development to kick in. Those are really long-term priorities. Are there any specific short-term priorities that you and the board need to achieve in the near future?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll just give you a handful that I think are on the top of my list. First of all, it's collaboration with all levels of the game across the country. So, Canada is a fantastic country. All of us Canadians, we say it's the best country in the world. When it comes to soccer, it is very diverse. You look at the East Coast, 6,000 kilometers all the way to the other end to the West Coast, and then up north, there's a lot of diversity. The challenges for soccer in, Burnaby, BC are entirely different than St. John's, Newfoundland, which are entirely different north of the Arctic Circle. So bringing all that expertise together is my role as president. We have provincial members, the presidents of all the provinces across the country. I need to work closely with them. I need to listen to what their challenges are because sometimes they can't solve those problems by themselves, but together we can. I think we can share best practices with each other. I think that's important. And, a lot of my academic research is surrounding knowledge management, the ability to not only share best practices, but to share worst practices, Jason, as well. So that, the left hand of the country is not making the same mistakes as the right hand of the country. If we learn something in Alberta, then we need to implement it in Saskatchewan, right? So all the different parts of the country are all going through different stages as it pertains to the recovery from COVID, and we need to work together. So that's one priority. Second is the women's game. Obviously, our women have raised their profile in such a significant way, especially in the last 12 to 24 months. Think of all the players now that are playing at some of the highest profile clubs in Europe. We always had the investment in the NWSL, but we need a franchise in Canada. So I'm going to be working hard with the board to try to figure out a way to bring professional soccer as a pathway for our women in this country. That's very, very important. I mean, it's a long time coming. The unfortunate thing, obviously, Jason, is that takes money. And, given that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, there are some other priorities, unfortunately, but we're going to get there with the women's game for sure. Third, the CPL and the MLS. These are our two pro pathways on the men's side. We need to start making sure that they work together and collaborate. We had a little bit of that this summer with the Island Games. You noticed there were many MLS Academy players that ended up getting borrowed by CPL franchises for the competition. And a lot of those MLS players actually did a very good job performing for the CPL teams. And that's the type of thing I want to see more of, a more systematized connection between the CPL and MLS, so we can raise the profile. I mean, one of the most amazing events I went to last year before the pandemic, actually, I think it was maybe just a couple of weeks before the lockdown, was the launch of Ottawa Atletico. I mean, could you imagine having, one of the biggest clubs on the planet invest in our game, in our country, in Ottawa? What an amazing story. Let's maintain that momentum. So keep the CPL going so that we can attract investors from maybe England and Germany and Italy, etc. And another one, a pet project of mine that's very, very important. And I'll tell you why, because it was part of my first initial strat plan when I started with Canada Soccer back in 2012, and that's our national registry. We need to have a database, Jason. I mean, we're in the year 2020, soon to be in the year 2021. There's 1 million plus players that play this game in our country. Plus, think of the parents of those players. So you could argue that there's maybe 4 million people in general who are loving soccer in this country. Who are they? How can we get a hold of them? How can we leverage their expertise? How can we also translate that database into commercial opportunities for Canada Soccer as well? So huge opportunities there. But, it's never going to be easy. Saying let's launch a database is easier said than done. So a lot of work still ahead of us to go.
Yeah, you touched on a few things there for sure that we'll talk about in a second around the strategic plan. But I want to focus on 2020 because it's been a year unlike any other. It's been a challenging year for everyone in the world. What impact has COVID had on the game of soccer in Canada in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, what a massive impact. I mean, let's face it. You go back to March when the major lockdown happened. Most young kids who were about to start registering for outdoor soccer in most provinces across the country, which would have started, let's say, in May and June, didn't. Their parents weren't allowed out of the house, let alone allowed to register their kids. So you could just imagine, all those registration fees that would have gone to our local clubs all across the country just did not materialize. And maybe your listeners don't know, but that's how we make some of our money as well at Canada Soccer. We make a portion of that fee goes to our bank account to pay for our expenses. And of course, we didn't get any of that money, which had a significant impact financially, not just on Canada Soccer, but on many of the provinces. And then you fast forward to September, as kids are maybe now thinking about going and playing indoor soccer and registering with their clubs. Well, again, we're not allowed to do that. Obviously, Toronto just recently announced our second lockdown. So that's going to have a huge impact, not only on playing soccer indoors, but now migrating into 2021. Do we even know for sure if we're going to have another outdoor season that's as healthy as it was back in 2019? So to answer your question, financially, yes, we've been hit. I mean, the soccer registrations are down. We're hoping to come up with strategies and plans to help the provinces bring those back up to 2019 pre-COVID levels. But you know what, Jason? I'm actually confident that we're going to be able to do this. And I'll tell you why. 2 reasons: human capital and relational capital. First of all, human capital. The people that are involved in our sport are fantastic. I have the luxury of traveling across the country as you do, Jason. There are so many bright people who are passionate about building up our sport again. So I think we're very, very lucky in that regard. We do have the people and we do have the staff at Canada Soccer as well to be able to do that. And secondly, relational capital. We're going to do this because of the relationships we have. So, part of my job as president is to make sure that I maintain strong relationships with the CPL, which of course I do. I know many of the senior individuals there and have known them for many years since we drew up what the CPL was going to look like on the back of a napkin at a restaurant. Same thing goes, with the MLS clubs. I have strong connections with them. We need those relationships. We need relationships with CONCACAF. Obviously, Victor, who's a friend to all of us and a mentor of mine. Victor was president when I first started at Canada Soccer. As CONCACAF comes out of COVID, so will Canada Soccer. And then, of course, the same thing goes with FIFA and Johnny and his role in Europe. The initiatives that Johnny will launch as part of FIFA's return after COVID, hopefully we will benefit from and use some of those proceeds. So all in all, yeah, we're going to have to get out of it. But you know what, Jason? It's not going to be lost forever. There are some industries, as you know, that have been fundamentally decimated because of COVID, and may never return. And this is the business academic researcher in me, right? So a lot of those industries perhaps are not going to be able to pivot and come back. I do not think we are in that same position. As Canada Soccer, I do believe we will return. When we did launch those return to play protocols all across the country, they were working. So if you look at the months of June, July, August, September, October, many of the kids and many of the adults started playing soccer again. Obviously, it was in a modified form to maintain safety as per our health professionals, but it was working. We are potentially going through now a second phase or a second version or a second curve. I'm not sure what the pandemic experts are calling it. But once we come out of that, obviously with the good news of the vaccination, I see us returning back and fulfilling a return to pre-COVID levels.
Some great points there, Dr. Bontis. I want to pick up on a couple of things that you said. I love the relational capital piece. I think that's hugely important. I say to my staff all the time, we're not in the soccer business. We're in the relationships business. We just happen to have soccer as our commonality. And, what we focus on a lot of our energy on is building those good relationships and those healthy relationships with stakeholders where you can have honest conversations about what's going wrong but also credit what's going right. I think that's a really important piece moving forward into 2021. The other piece too is I think 2020 has really pushed us outside of our comfort zone. It's forced us, because of a global pandemic, to get better at what we do and to push each other outside our comfort zones. And we've certainly improved in our processes and our relationships with other people. I actually feel like coast to coast as a nation, we're tighter now. We're closer. We're more caring about each other's well-being than we maybe were before COVID. So I think that's a really positive thing and something that I hope continues into 2021 and beyond. What does 2021 and beyond look like for Canada Soccer, knowing that there's so many variables that are outside of our control? But what is, in your mind, does that picture look like?
Sure. You know what? As president, you asked me about, am I ready to be president because I was a player? That's a perfect example of what soccer players learn who start playing the game at a very young age. You learn to compete and train. You learn how to do time management, and you learn how to win. But the other thing that you learn how to do, Jason, is you learn how to lose respectfully and honorably. I had a youth coach, a fantastic man who, some of his quotes still resonate to me in my brain 45 years later. And he used to tell me all the time, Nick, when we win, that's awesome. When we lose, we learn. So there's never an opportunity lost. And you're right. COVID 2019 is the opportunity for us to learn how to do our business better, how to synergize, and how to collaborate better. So for 2021, what does that mean? Well, first, let's start with our national teams. There's people out there that are complaining, that are saying, oh, well, our national teams have not been playing. Well, let me tell you something. There are health experts who know the field of what are the medical implications and the health implications of COVID way better than me and way better than you, Jason. And when they advise us that we should not be sending our players, then we're going to listen to them. So that's the first thing I'd like to point out to everybody. We take the advice of the health authorities in this country as it pertains to whether or not our national teams are going to play or whether or not they're going to travel. Having said that, sometimes you have to take a step back before you can take two steps forward. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen in 2021. So we may have not played in the most recent FIFA windows, but obviously in early 2021, I expect us to have a full suite of competitive matches as well as camps, not only on the men's side, but also on the women's side, because we've got two significant events to look forward to. Obviously, John is going to be taking the men through qualification in March, and Bev is going to be taking the women through the Olympics in the summer. So I think it's very, very important to look at that. Obviously, the national team has a halo effect over the rest of soccer. So, when the men are being watched by fans and children, and when the women are being watched by fans and children, that has a trickle-down effect to registrations. It has a trickle-down effect to sponsorship. It has a trickle-down effect just to the happiness surrounding the game. So I think a focus of our national teams will come in early 2021, which will then allow us to establish the platform and the foundation. Because you know what, Jason, the other issue is we got 26. People think it's 5 years away. Oh my God, that's such a long time away. It's not. In 2021, I, as president, along with my board, we will start planning what 2026 is going to look like for our country. So it's not far away at all. So we've got a lot of stuff to look forward to in 2021 and beyond.
Another thing that needs to be looked at very closely in 2021 is building a new strategic plan. This is your area of expertise, Dr. Bontis. What does that process entail, building a strategic plan? And what are some of the key areas of focus, you think?
So we did something actually quite unique with the previous two strat plans that hadn't been done in the 100-year history of Canada soccer. And that is ask people what our priorities should be. Historically, going back, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, typically it was the president's role and alongside with his or her board to kind of figure out what the strategic priorities are. Well, obviously being a strategy professor myself, we took a stakeholders approach. We actually surveyed 3,000 people across the country in both instances and had a fantastic campaign, town hall meetings, focus groups, and we asked all of our stakeholders, what should be our priorities. I anticipate we do the same, obviously coming in for 2021. But I also believe, Jason, that I don't think we're going to see much significant difference in what our three priorities now. So for those of us that have worked on our current strat plan, the three main strategic pillars today are to govern the game, develop the game, and grow the game. I see those pillars as potentially not changing for 21 moving forward. What I do see changing are all the strategic initiatives, tasks, tactics, and objectives underlying those three pillars. So for example, under govern, how do we operate as an organization, as a sport, vis-a-vis FIFA and CONCACAF rules? How do the provinces work with each other? How do we govern the professional game all the way down to grassroots? That has always been the raison d'etre of Canada soccer. I don't see that going away. Develop. That's your baby, Jason, and you've done a fantastic job, but we got to do more. Obviously, the famous saying, more Sinclairs and more Alphonso Davies more often. That's what we need to continue to do. I don't see that changing. That still becomes a priority, investing in our youth teams, making sure that we take them through the pathway right up to our national teams. And then the third pillar is grow. And I think I already mentioned about 25 minutes ago, that is the number one objective of my presidency. We need to grow back to where we were pre-COVID and then grow onward towards 2026. So I'm excited for the new strat plan, but I can assure all your listeners out there that this is not going to be a Nick Bontis strat plan or a Jason deVos strat plan or a board, Canada Soccer board strat plan. This will be your strat plan. It's the listeners out there, the fans, the parents, the players. We surveyed 3,000 people last time, and I anticipate us doing the same thing again. So at the end of the day, whatever the strat plan does become, it will be a document that you, the listener, has created.
There's exciting times ahead, Dr. Bontis, and I know that we are all looking forward to 2021 with anticipation. Again, congratulations on your election, and we look forward to working with you and having you join us again when we return for season 3 of the Canada Soccer Nation podcast in early 2021. Dr. Bontis, again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate all that you do, and I encourage all your listeners out there to contact your clubs, contact your districts, your provincial associations, your pro clubs. They need your support. It's very difficult in a lockdown environment, in a pandemic environment, especially when you have much of soccer being run by volunteers. They need to be re-energized by the fans that are out there. So I encourage all the fans to speak and offer assistance and help whenever and wherever you can, because the only way we're going to get out of this is together. So thank you very much, Jason. I appreciate it.
Brilliant advice. Excellent stuff. Excellent. When we come back, I'll be joined by Brad Fougere. We'll get his thoughts on today's episode, and we'll look ahead to 2021 and beyond. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the final episode of Series 2 of the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. We are signing off on 2020, and we will be back in early 2021 with Season 3 of the Canada Soccer Nation podcast. Joined now by Brad Fougere, Digital and Corporate Communications Manager with Canada Soccer, to recap the episode and possibly the year. Well, let's start with the episode, Brad. Valerio Gazzola, just a great guy. I played for Valerio for 2 years when I was in Montreal, 93, 94, and then again in 96. So 3 years in total. But I learned so much from him when he was a coach. He was very passionate, and you can see that today. He's still passionate. He lives and breathes the game. He's had every job under the sun in Canada soccer, coast to coast. I think he's worked at the national team level. He's worked at the professional level. He's been a coach educator for decades. He's been a teacher for decades. So just vastly experienced. But what were some of the key takeaways for you in the conversation with Valerio?
Yeah, it definitely is passion. I mean, his voice oozes passion for the game. And I mean, Valerio has had more jobs than even just the ones you've listed. I mean, our French community will recognize his voice as the voice of the Canadian Championship in French on One Soccer. I can't even imagine, Jason, how many coaches would have learned from Valerio in the time that he's been doing it.
Thousands, I would think.
Right? I mean, it would be hard to estimate. It would be a fun math project for me between now and when we come back for Season 3.
We'll get Richard Scott on that.
That's a good call. He'll bail though, as usual.
I know,
but yeah, just it's tough to underscore the importance, I guess, of passion, right? Of sort of the intrinsic value that you see from something that you're passionate about, and just the willingness to do everything and throw everything that you are, and stretch all of your marital capital so that you can continue, despite having full-time hours, right? Like that's a real thing that we all have to face. Everyone in the game in Canada has to face. It's not 9 to 5. And so, you gotta get that intrinsic value from what it is that you're doing in order to try and move the game forward.
Yeah.
And man, yeah, it's tough to measure up to Valerio. That's for sure. There's very few who can.
It's funny. I always wish that I could go back and just sit on the sideline and watch my early days as a player, and just, they say that, youth is wasted on the young. It absolutely is, because there's so much gold that you can learn in those early years that you're just oblivious to, because you just don't know what you don't know. But I remember
the problem is everything, right? When you're young, man, there's nothing to learn because you know it all.
Yeah, exactly. But I've been lucky because I've stayed in touch with Valerio over the years, and obviously when I came back into this role, he was already working as a learning facilitator for Canada Soccer, and he was one of the first people that I spoke with. About, what have you learned over the years? What could we do differently? What can we change? What can we get better at? Where does our growth need to happen? And he's always got suggestions. He's always thinking deeply about how to get better and how to improve. And I think you have to be wired a certain way to be that way. You have to be a giver and not a taker. And our sport, I think all sport has a lot of people in it who are in it for themselves, but Valerio is not one of those people. He's in it for other people. He's in it to help other people get better. And I think that's a really important aspect of being an educator. There's no coincidence, I think, that he's been a teacher for 30 years, but also a coach educator for probably as long, and excelled in both fields, because I think that's just his mindset. It's the way he's wired to give back and see the game grow. And I'm really excited for 2026 and the possible qualification still that is on the cards for 2022. We also saw a living legend leave the world very recently, Diego Maradona, and it brought back so many memories of the World Cup for me. And I look across the country and I see that inspiration. Another legend of the game that we lost recently, Tony Waiters, brought this to mind as well. It's been 2020 has been one hit after another in this respect. We've lost so many legends of the game, but it brought me back to those early days of what the World Cup meant to me in '86. Tony leading the team to the tournament, and Diego Maradona obviously stealing the show from everybody. But what 2026 is going to bring for the next generation of Canadian kids is that pinnacle event. And 2022 could do the same thing. I mean, imagine that, Brad, back-to-back men's World Cups. What could that do for the game, the next generation of boys and girls in our country? Watching the women's team at the Olympics get on the podium again for a third time. All of these things, the potential of what 2021 can bring and beyond is really exciting. So there's just so much to think about and look forward to. But I really enjoyed that chat with Valerio. It was too short. We're going to have him back on to talk about all of the other experiences that he's had over the years in the game. I'm waffling on a little bit, so I want to get to President-elect Nick Bontis, Dr. Nick Bontis. Canada Soccer obviously had its annual meeting of its membership recently. It was done virtually. Congratulations to Dr. Bontis, newly elected president. Also, congratulations to Paul Martin and Don Story, who were elected to the board of directors, and Kelly Brown and Bob Richardson, who were appointed to the board of directors. Very much looking forward to working with all of them under their leadership and guidance in the years to come. We had a pretty deep conversation with Dr. Bontis, and he touched on some really important aspects of growth and development for the game. What were the key messages that you heard in my chat with Dr. Bontis?
Yeah, a lot, right? There's a lot there. Nick is a very, very, Dr. Bontis is a very, very passionate football man. I mean, we heard him talk about his 45 years of experience in the game.
At every level, by the way. He's been at every level.
For sure. So I mean that is obviously invaluable. I think he brings a very specific skill set. I mean, he's a chair of strategic management at McMaster University. So obviously on the pathway to what will be the biggest opportunity that the sport in this country has ever seen. Having someone who can spearhead the strategic thinking and strategic management of what we need from corporate Canada, what we need from the members of our club licensing program, from community organizations across this country, from our member associations, et cetera, et cetera. I think we've got someone who's going to be able to think about that. And he said it. His job is to go out there and bring people together. We have a very diverse country, and we've not always done the best job at bringing those diverse voices to the table. So for me, it's in there, right? I've seen firsthand, Jason, you and I sit on calls all the time where we bring people together, be they technical staff, executive directors, and when everyone's pulling in the same direction, some pretty incredible things can happen. So if if Dr. Bontis can continue that work, 2 or 3 levels above us, and bring the brightest minds in this country together, bring corporate Canada to the table. I don't even know. I mean, you talked a little bit about the opportunity of hosting the World Cup and what it'll mean, and reflected back on 1986 and Maradona, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if anyone knows what potential this is, right? I mean, we're going to host the World Cup. Like it's crazy. We've talked about this a couple of times. The day it happened, I ran out of the Canada Soccer offices celebrating with the other champions playing as loud. But I don't know what it's going to mean, but it's going to be incredible. So yeah, no, it's Dr. Bontis was a little bit muted, right? I mean, these are early days and these are difficult times. We both know that he's a very effervescent personality. He's got boundless, ceaseless energy. And that's what we're going to get. We got a little muted, Dr. Bontis, but
that was an introduction. That was just an introduction. We're gonna crank it up a few notches, I'm sure, because I know he's going to be very present and be someone that will speak passionately about the work that's going on across the country at every level. And again, you talk about his experience at every level of the game. I think that bodes well. I would be remiss though if I didn't pause for a second and say a big thank you to Steve Reed, the outgoing president. Steve spoke very passionately at the AMM about his time and the role that he played, the role that he and some of the senior management, senior leadership of the organization played in landing the World Cup in 2026 will be the legacy. And when that tournament does take place on Canadian soil, I think we all should be nodding our heads in the direction of those individuals who put in a real shift to bring the tournament home. And, I think we should all say a big thank you to Steve. He was very quiet, very good human being who stayed sort of behind the scenes. But the work that he put in and the leadership that he provided as part of Canada Soccer's board for the best part of 15 years, I think it was, Brad.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a reason why the game is in as good a place it is now, is that we've had good people like that leading the organization. So thank you to Steve for his efforts throughout his tenure with Canada Soccer. I've known Dr. Bontis for quite a few years now. I don't even know how many years, and I don't even remember when I first met him, but I do remember going to watch him speak. And this wasn't in a soccer role. This was in his other role. He's a very accomplished public speaker. And I went to watch him speak, and I was just blown away by this guy's presence. And I remember speaking with him and his wife, Stacy, afterwards, and just being so impressed by the energy and the drive and the thought process. When you look at his academic career, what he does at McMaster University and the strategic planning, he's got a very accomplished academic career, and those skill sets are very, very valuable. And one of the things that resonated with me in my conversation with him was, what does the next strategic plan look like? And one of the things that he said was that the three pillars that we have now, develop, govern, and grow, are maybe not going to change. And I like that, because I think it's really the role that all governing bodies play. That's what we're here to do, is to develop the game, to govern the game, and to grow the game. The individual activities of each department within those three pillars will change from one strat plan to the next. And I would say that even at the club level, we work with clubs at the club licensing program, and a lot of clubs don't really know what a strategic plan is supposed to be about. Ultimately, those are the three things that you need to do at the club level as well. Develop the game, govern the game, and grow the game. Now, govern's a different role because you're governing within your own club, but that's ultimately what you're trying to do. And if you can align your strategic priorities to those three things, you're very likely not going to go wrong. You're probably going to be on the right track. So, in your mind, Brad, what else resonated with you? I know that there was a lot discussed in a very short period of time, and some key messages there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the root of it all is the need for us to get through this pandemic, right? I mean, Dr. Bontis spoke about writing his plan last Christmas, and campaigning for this presidency in normal times, right? This before Christine Sinclair had broken her record, before the women had qualified for Tokyo. He built a plan for himself to grow the game in this country. And then the reality struck. And so, for me, I think we keep talking about this opportunity of 2026, but without that as sort of our North Star, there might be significantly more fear about how we get back to 2019 numbers, right? How do we get registrations back to wherever they were? How do we get the momentum back of launching a domestic league? How do we get the momentum back of back-to-back women's Olympic bronze medals and a men's national team well on their way to qualifying for the World Cup? So just bring on 2021 is where I'm at right now, Jason. And I know that Dr. Bontis is of similar mind. Obviously he spoke at some length about some of his priorities around the diversification of revenues, of not getting ourselves into a position where something like a global pandemic can wipe out registration fees that we rely on as an organization, and finding a way to reorient the organization to have more diversified revenue streams so that we can be better prepared in the future for something like this, which, we're all extremely hopeful won't happen again in our lifetimes. But other things come and go. So, I mean, we got to get back to where we were, and then we need some rocket fuel. And as you mentioned, this is the guy.
Yeah, I think the other thing that really resonated with me was the word collaboration and the need for that at every level of the game. I think it's ironically one of the things that we've done well in 2020, certainly better than in previous years, in part because we've been forced to. We've had to work remotely. We're all working from home, so we're spending our days now on video calls looking at each other. But what I've noticed in my conversations with technical leaders at every level of the game across the country over the last 9-10 months is that people genuinely care about the well-being of others. And that's pushed us in the right direction, I think, in many respects. And hopefully that will continue long into 2021 and beyond. But yes, I do agree. I think we will all love to see the back of 2020. and as I said earlier, this is the last episode of the Canada Soccer Nation podcast this year. So I will sign off by wishing everyone a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year's. Stay safe, be with your loved ones, do your absolute utmost to look after yourselves, look after each other, and remain socially distant for as long as the public health authorities require us to do so. But in the end, we'll see you all in 2021. Take care.